In this video, we're going to look at pivot tables. Pivot tables are one of the strongest elements within Excel. And what a pivot table allows you to do is to take a very large table and then quickly drag and drop fields from within that table to very quickly summarize that table. Once again, we could have a table with 10,000 rows or 50,000 rows. If it's a valid table, we can drag and drop those fields and drop them into certain buckets that will allow us to quickly summarize that table. But it's tremendously powerful and very easy to do. The key is to have a good, valid Excel table. So once again, the key to a good pivot table is a strong Excel table. The file that we're going to be using is called T5.5 Pivot Table Quiz. Looking at the information here, we have our header row. Another name for header row are our fields. The fields for this table will be date, store, product, manager, state, and sales. And basically, we're going to be dragging and dropping these field names into buckets that will allow us to summarize this table, which is fairly small. It only has 30 rows, but we could do it just as easily with a table that has 500 or 1,000 or 10,000 or 20,000, as long as you have a good, strong Excel table. So our first step, what I always recommend, is to take your data and turn it into an Excel table. We're going to click directly beneath our headers, click on Insert, then click on Table. So once again, the first step is to turn it into an Excel table. Click OK. We know that we have an Excel table because we have our dialog boxes or our downward arrows next to each of our field names, which will allow us to sort our table and to filter our table, which is to select only a few records or rows from within your table. That's what filter means. I'm going to leave this table name as Table 1 for the time being. So we have an Excel table. It's called Table 1. And it's made up of field names, date, store, product, manager, state, and sales. So we've turned it into an Excel table. And the reason why we turned it into an Excel table is that Excel tables are dynamic. You can add information to that table or subtract information from that table. And if the pivot table is based upon an Excel table, it can then be updated. It'll look back at that Excel table and allow you to once again update it. It's not static, it's dynamic. If your pivot table is based upon an Excel table, which right now it is. Next step, quite easily, we have an Excel table. It's called Table 1. We're going to click on Insert tab, and this time we're going to insert a pivot table. Click here for our pivot table. The pivot table right now, Excel has picked up that it's based upon this Table 1, which is right. We want to put this pivot table into a new worksheet. Okay? Now you could actually put it on the same worksheet, but I want enough room to show the various types of manipulations. So our pivot table is based upon the Table 1, and we're going to put that pivot table into a new worksheet. Click OK. We have a new worksheet. It's called Sheet 1, and we're going to just call it Pivot. Now, We know we have a pivot table because we have this box here, but more importantly, over to the right, pivot table fields. These are our fields from our table, the various fields. The fields are right above 4 boxes. This box right here is the filter box, and we're going to be using that in a minute. We have a box for columns. So in other words, we can drag and drop a field name into the columns. We can also drag and drop a field name into the rows, which we will be doing. And we can drag and drop information from the field into the values box right here. And the values box is where any type of calculations take place, where we're summing numbers or averaging numbers or finding the minimum number, but it's where we're doing calculations. So numbers, for the most part, are going to be dragged into this values box. So once again, how these work is taking our fields and dragging and dropping them into any of these 4 boxes. We have the beginnings of our pivot table, the key elements being these various field names from our table. All we have to do is just start dragging and dropping. I'm going to begin by taking the date field. And drag and drop it into rows. A couple of ways of doing that. If I get rid of it here, I can put a check mark next to date, and automatically it goes into the rows field. To get rid of it, hover over it, you've got your cross, drag and drop it. Drag and drop it to move it out of the box. Once again, date, hold down the left mouse and drop it into rows. We have our row labels with the various months that are listed from our table. It's already made that calculation. So we have the months of January through October. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to perform a grouping, because I also want to be able to look at this in terms of quarters and years. How you do a grouping for your months. Okay, so we grab the dates, dragged and dropped them into rows. You can come over here and just click on any of the months. Click on one of them, right click. Come down and click on group. Excel has determined that the first date in your pivot table is 1/1/2017, and it goes all the way up to 10/2 or October 2nd of 2017. But right now, it's only figured out the days and the months. I want to be able to show the quarters and the years. And it's I recommend strongly that you always click on the quarters and, more importantly, the years, because you might have months and they could be in multiple years. Click here, OK. And now you can see what's happened. We have years, quarters, months, and the individual dates. I'm going to go back once again to show you this idea of grouping. We dragged and dropped the date into rows. I went and clicked on one of the months, right click, group. And so important, I just clicked on quarters, so that quarters will now be appearing in a minute. And the most important one to always click on is to click on years, because you could have multiple years in your table. Our table is very small, it's only covering 1 year. But 99% of the time, you always want to be able, when you're doing your grouping, you want to make sure that the years is highlighted. And you can see right here what's happened. All of a sudden, my rows have been expanded. Years, quarters, months, and date. Everything is listed here. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take the field called Manager, and we're going to drag it down into the Filters box. So once again, I took Managers, I held down the left mouse, and I dragged and dropped it into Manager. Now what's appearing here now is Managers up here. And it's showing all of the managers. But what I want to do is I want to filter it. I only want to select one of the managers, and the manager I want to select is McKenna. Highlight him, click OK. So once again, filter, manager. We went up here, hit the down arrow, and we only selected McKenna. So looking here, we have the beginnings of this pivot table. We have our filter, manager. We've selected only McKenna. And for our rows, we have the years, the quarters, the months, and the date. What I'm going to do next is click on the months. I got my cross, drag and drop it up into columns. I mean, this is the beauty of this. If I made a mistake, I can just drag and drop it back. Okay, so it's back again. But once again, I want to click on months, hold down the left mouse, and drag and drop it up into columns. So here's all of our months automatically appearing. Next, what I want to do is I want to do some computations, and I want to take sales and drag and drop them right here. So here's all of our sales. I want to do some formatting. This is very important. Right now, we have row labels and column labels. You don't really know what your field names are. And this is the easiest way to show your field names. We have our pivot table, kind of makes sense, but I want to make it cleaner. So the easiest way of doing that to show the field names is to click within the pivot table. Next, click on Design. So we clicked on Design. Come over to Report Layout. And then click on Show in Tabular Form, which is another way of saying show as a table, show in tabular form. So all of a sudden now, once again, it's getting a little cleaner. We have our years, our quarters, so we know what all these various fields stand for now. I want to do some formatting for the various sales. The way to do it is to click on one of the sales. And this is very important. Just click on one of them. Right-click. Number formats. Not format cells, but click on number format. And we can go with currency or accounting. I'm going to go with accounting right now. Accounting. And I'm going to go with 0 decimal places. It's beginning to look a little cleaner. Once again, we have now by year, the quarters, the individual dates, and then the months. All of a sudden, I've decided I don't need all the individual dates. So what you can do is go down to date. You have a cross, hold down the left mouse, and just pull it out of the box and release. Once again, it's getting a little bit cleaner all of the time. So we have the years, the various quarters. Quarter one is made up of these three sets of numbers, January, February, and March. Quarter two, these three months, April, May, and June. Quarter three, July, August, and September. And right now for quarter four, the only month that had sales figures was October. And we have a grand total for 2017 and also a grand total. Next, we're going to look at the idea of a slicer. And what a slicer is in a pivot table is the ability to filter the information by just selecting a certain part of the field. Let me show you what I mean. In order to get a slicer, click within the pivot table. Okay? Click within the pivot table. Click on Pivot Table Analyze. And over here to the left, we're going to click on Insert a Slicer. The slices list all of our fields. In this case, we want the field name or slicer having to do with quarters. Check mark here. Click OK. We can make this slicer a little bit smaller. You could even make it 2 columns, which even makes it smaller. So we have our slicer quarters. Right now, everything is chosen. A slicer now allows you to filter or select just part of your pivot table. If I click on quarter one, bingo. All that's listed is quarter one, January, February, and March, and what the numbers are that pertain to quarter one. If I select quarter three, click on it. It's changed, quarter three, the months involved in quarter three and what the sales are. If I want to show everything, I click over here, clear the filter. So now everything is now showing. Next, we're going to create a chart from our pivot table. Best way of doing that, click within your pivot table, click Pivot Table Analyze, and then click on Pivot Chart. You can choose what type of chart you want. I'm going to go with the recommended, which is clustered column. Click OK. Drag down my chart. Now the beauty of this is I can go up to my slicer, click on quarter one, and everything changes. Quarter one, here's the information, the months. Quarter three, it's changed here, and the months involved. We probably should have a title. Click the plus. Chart title. We're going to call it sales by quarter. Number 2, the information. Number 4, just the month of October, and it's showing quarter 4. Click over here, all the months are showing. We have our pivot table. Right now, all the quarters are showing. I'm going to choose quarter 1. So that only quarter 1 is showing. A lot of times you want to get rid of these little buttons here. The easiest way of doing it is by hovering over it, like sum of sales, or right click, hide all field buttons on chart. Once again, what I did to get rid of those buttons, kind of get rid of your clutter. I come to the buttons, hover over it, right click, hide all field buttons on chart. Put everything back together, show all quarters, click here. Just quarter 4, click here. Show everything. And once again, you're not limited to just one slicer. Click in your pivot table analysis, insert slicer, click on store. If we wanted to have a slicer for store, these are your 3 stores. If I wanted just B, that's all that would show. There's nothing in B. It appears as if the only ones are A. But once again, you can have multiple slices. Quarter 1, everything is showing. Here's our chart, our pivot table, our slicer. Thank you.